Hi, and welcome back to Marketing Evolved podcast with Holly Peterson and
Jason Peterson.
we want to thank you guys for listening in on what we're talking about today, and it would be the actual part 2 of our series on sort of the State of the Union, as we're calling it, as it relates to where we've been, where we are, and kind of where we're going. We're working on going basically 10 years in business, and so we're kind of taking a look at all of the various services that we offer over the course of the past several years, which actually those have even evolved since we began. But today specifically, we're talking about social media. So kind of where it was when we got started, where we're at right now, and sort of like what we're looking at as we move forward. Last week we talked about, or last podcast I should say, we talked about websites. So again, today we're going to focus on social media. All right. Shall we move on to topic number 2, which would be social media?
Yes. That's a big one.
In our previous podcast, we have done a lot of conversation revolving around social media. And I mean, good grief. If any of these topics that we're talking about as far as the state of the union goes is, evolving, would definitely be social media and the various platforms that are available. Many of them have come, many of them have gone, many of them are sticking around, many of them are eyeball deep in issues, in politics and problems, controversy. But that's not really what we're here to talk about. We're here, of course, to talk about how it relates to your business, in particular small businesses, and just sort of how you're using those really, and if you're not using those, and why you're not using those. It's extremely loaded topic.
Yeah, big time. Yep.
And to be honest with you, it used to be when clients would come in the door, we would say, okay, here are the top 1, 2, 3 platforms that you need to be involved in. Don't worry about the other ones. Let's get started with you on those. And, here's your digital marketing strategy based on who we've studied your clientele to be, who you're trying to go for based on your products and services, and blah, 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 blah. That is not the case anymore. When clients come in and they say, we need help with social media, the first thing I look at is, okay, so who is your target market? And it's okay if you don't know that, but it's definitely time that you figure that out, and we can help with that. Number 2, what is your ultimate end goal? Because that's going to affect the time and effort in the messaging that you spend on whatever platform you choose to go for. And if it doesn't make sense to be on Facebook, we're not going to put you on Facebook. It used to be the kind of automatic default social media feed that we would get people on. But you know what? That doesn't make sense for a lot of industries. If you're a B2B person, maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. Maybe it makes more sense for you to spend more time on LinkedIn and get your messaging out there, because the tools with that have changed over the years, especially since we got started.
Yes.
A lot of these, smaller, more community-oriented ones, like I'm sure some people have heard about the Alignables and the Nextdoors and things like that of that nature. It might make sense for you to be there. And maybe that's where you spend most of your time. Maybe it's Yelp now. I mean, there's just so many different caveats. And to be honest with you, you're going to do better when you find more of your niche. So we do encourage people to take a second look, slow down a little bit. That's fine if you've been on those other platforms before, but then ask yourself, how are they performing?
Yeah.
What's your engagement like? It may not make sense for you to be everything to everybody. And we don't want to see you spin your wheels doing that. We want you to get as much traction as you can where you can get it. So that is one of the ways that it has evolved since we started several years back, and kind of where we are and where we're going. Jason, thoughts on that?
Well, I think when we first started, social media was still kind of this bright and shiny object where obviously there was a tremendous amount of momentum. People were using it. They were using a lot of different platforms. Some of them existed. Some of them didn't then, like Instagram. Pinterest came around new. So there was, like, every day there was something new that was happening. So
Or a new way to use it.
A new way to use it or whatever.
Yeah,
So
new tool that was introduced.
I mean, when we started, Facebook didn't have business pages. So there was just a lot of stuff that had not matured. So I think in those early years, much like anything else, is we were trying to figure out and make sense of what is necessary and helpful and what is just waste and not necessary. And I think to your point, we've seen in the positive way because it's been around. I mean, social media now is like 16, I think technically 15, 16 years old now as far as Facebook goes.
Yeah.
So the
if we're
concept-
going back to Facebook.
Yeah, so the concept of social media now is not a new concept. So it's kind of one of those, well, as a business owner, you need to at least understand what role does it play. And I think, like you said, Holly, we're not here to say, and I used to say this with a website, why? Like, why do you want to be on Facebook? Why do you want to be on Google? Like, we need to answer
Have you
those
checked
questions.
to see if that's where your audience is?
That's right. Because at the end of the day, the power of digital marketing is that you can get things in front of the people you want to. And social media very specifically has that capability. So, I mean, I'm not shocked how social media has kind of gotten a little crazy in terms of all the different ways and aspects that it's been used. But I will say that social media has, again, brought in, and I think the same thing applies with this whole smartphones, is as soon as our parents, and we had grandkids, or we had kids and they had grandkids, that changed the driving force behind now you had a multi-generational audience now, everybody from 75 to 15 in whatever platform you're in where they're using it. I mean, I looked in general of the entire world, 3 billion people use social media in terms of every day.
That's
So
crazy.
that's ridiculous. I mean, that's just, we're talking over a third of the population of the globe. Now, what does that mean for Lincoln, Nebraska? I think that, for us, I think as things have matured, like initially, LinkedIn was not really that great. I mean, it was okay for like a resume building site, but it was terrible for posting. Facebook initially was terrible for business, and then it evolved and had business pages. Facebook ultimately acquired Instagram.
How about MySpace?
Oh, goodness. That's right.
What about
Forgot
Vine?
there you go, Vine. So for everyone that succeeded, you went through that where people were acquired and bought WhatsApp.
The
Again,
various iterations.
various iterations. So I feel like now because it has matured, you and I look at bottom lines when we meet with the clients, like, okay, what's the least amount we need to spend to get you off the ground? Now, if social media is that answer, great. But we're usually having to understand and decide, does Google get you off the ground quicker or does social media? I think the misconception with social media is people think it's like a quick fix. And because you and Van work so much time on this, that it's a slow burn. It takes a while to build those relationships. So
the hoops that you have to jump through now are so much greater than they were 9 years ago.
Absolutely.
It was kind of enough just to be on the platforms 9 years ago. Now you're vying. You have so much competition. You're vying for such a small, minuscule amount of time of people's attention that, like Jason said, even as it relates to websites, I mean, honestly, the same goes for, in fact, I would say even less time to capture them, because as people are scrolling through their feed, it doesn't matter what platform it's on. You have such a small amount of time to capture their interest, and everybody else is vying for that same interest from those individuals. So even if you're able to get in front of like your specific demographic that you're looking for, what makes you so great that they're going to stop and look at your content and then go even a step further and take some sort of action there? So, Jason's obviously alluding to this as well, is that moment of time that you have to capture that audience is even less than a website.
Yeah, and I think this is where, Holly, as she got into this with me and as we've added team members to help us with as well, is a lot of what equates to the opportunity for marketing success is engagement. You have to get people to interact, and you have to earn that. So again, back in the day, you could just post stuff out there, but because people are so busy and there's so much content, you can't be lazy at marketing. You have to work really hard, and you have to evaluate. It's like we always say, if you okay, first step is we just got to get a system going of consistency at the what's the reasonable spaced repetition to make sense, but that's only half the game.
That's not even half the game anymore.
Probably it's a
Because
fourth.
the next step is the quality level of your content, and then, like Jason said, obviously the fact that you need to make it not only of those two tiers, but then going into a third tier of what's going to engage that person. or at least enough people to generate the interest. And we've talked about this in other podcasts too. The thing that's honestly, in my opinion, maybe it's because I'm like tail end of Gen X, but it's scary to me that in order for some of these, like say for the millennial generation, they won't even engage in anything unless like 50 to 100 other people have already done it.
Right.
So there is a lot of peer pressure that goes on. And I'm not just talking about businesses. I'm even talking about how they have their peer-to-peer relationships on social media. So like if you've got all these obstacles floating out there. You got quality content. You've got consistent content. But then you have to break through that barrier of getting people to actually care enough and be willing to step out enough to start that hopefully snowball effect of engagement in order to get even other people to take a second glance at it. So like there's this weird peer pressure that's going on with social media feeds as well. It's just absolutely crazy.
Yeah, and to me, so this is again where the principle behind social media is people. And I think this is where the more brands we work with, and this is frankly you and I, this is why we only work with small businesses owners, is because the more authentic and the more real and genuine, and the fact that they show how they care about what they do, that plays well. And I think as social media has evolved, if you want to get that generation below us and whatnot, you can't fake that. You know, they're looking for that the why is strong. That this is not just cool, but it's real. It's something like, man,
It needs to go deeper.
it needs to go deeper. And I think what I see is
It needs to be worthy of their attention.
that's right. And so again, the conventional marketing wisdom was just repetition, in your face, in your face, in your face. And that is, yeah, that may be somewhat true, but to get people to actually care about your brand, you have to
you need to go the opposite direction.
you need to go the opposite direction. And
no salesy, no markety, nobody cares about
no
that.
pushy. You're not trying to go cram it down their throat. So on the one hand, the opportunity in social media is 10 times greater for small business than it is for larger businesses because it is a focus on people. But as you and I have talked many times when we sit down with clients, is that it's just a very narrow window we have to like hit. If you're too far in one way or the other, really social media falls flat in its face. So it's a delicate balance. And I agree, as time has gone on, if you hit it on the mark, it can be exceptional. But if you don't constantly pursue that voice and that message that people actually give a heck about, then it's not effective.
Well, and it also speaks to what we were talking about with websites too, is that the most successful marketing now is not necessarily to the masses. It's to a niche market. You're saying that, and you might have a couple of those. I'm not saying you only have to narrow it down to one. You actually might have a couple of niche markets or people that you're marketing to. But what you need to do is you need to have targeted messaging that addresses those individuals specifically. And then perhaps on, maybe that's a Facebook for your 55 plus people. And then you've got a whole nother demographic set that is over on Instagram. So that's going to look a little different. And that messaging is going to be a little bit different. Although you might even be marketing the same thing, just in a different way. A good case in point is I'm on social media all the time for business. So honestly, at the end of the day, when I go home, that's kind of one of the last things I want to do is to get onto social media.
Me as well.
But admittedly, if I've got a little time before I go to bed, which I know is a no-no with the blue light, blah, blah, I will cruise a little bit on Instagram, Facebook, but honestly, usually my preference is Pinterest because it's going to be things that I've already curated for myself that I care about, and it's nothing related to work. But I was on Facebook the other day, and I follow this feed called, what's it? It's like something like I Hate Mommy or something like that. But anyway, and I came across this little meme thing that was on there, and it was this really beautiful,
scary mommy,
scary mommy, and it was this picture, this juxtaposition of these two pictures set beside one another. And there was this beautiful girl. I mean, she was probably like 21 or 22, and she was in this adorable little like romper summer thing, hair flowing, obviously picture of perfection. And then on the other side was a picture of the penguin from Batman. And Danny DeVito, I'm sure many of you have already seen that, but he was a pretty disgusting character. Literally, when he talked,
Oh my
like black
gosh.
crap would fall out of his mouth, and he was just quite a character.
He was hideous.
So anyway, it shows this beautiful woman in this one image, and then side by side, and all it said above it was some women in a romper, and then the other said me in a romper.
That was
And
very funny. I'm not even chicken. That was
laughed
hilarious.
my head off. But based on my age group, based on being a mom, basically these various little things that I could tick off in my head, they were speaking to me, the consumer. And this wasn't a thing about how beautiful I could look in this romper if I purchased it. It was more of an identification of we see you and we get you. And so that was one of the first things I remember with the Scary Mommy blog that drew me in, is like, they get me and they're okay with authentic content. So that speaks back to all businesses. Maybe it doesn't look like Danny DeVito in a scary, like, onesie fat suit
yeah, I
thing.
was gonna say.
but what is going to draw them in? You know, I'm not talking about shock value. I'm talking about authenticity. You seeing your consumer and recognizing who they are and speaking to their needs. So you need to think about that as a business.
Well, and I think to some of it is, the ones that do well in social that you work with don't talk down. They interact with. So it's, to me, if you allow yourself to mingle with the masses, and if you're used to, as a business owner, not approaching it that way, that's like, again, you have to almost deprogram the way you operate, because it's very different. This is not.
You need to be approachable.
This is not billboards and yellow pages and in radio ads. It's a very different mindset. So
and to some degree, many times, it's not even putting your best foot forward.
No,
I
no.
mean, it is the best of you, but it's showing them that you are just as real as they are, and you have a solution to whatever their problem, quote unquote, is.
So, as hard as it may seem to grasp, Facebook still is a relationship-based marketing product. I mean, we say that it's marketing more to develop a group of individuals. I always like this analogy where we have some home builders we help. Well, let's think about that. One time you're going to probably have them either buy or sell, work with you on buying or selling a home. In this case, it'd be building a home. And you're not going to work with them again. So what role does social media play there? If it's done correctly and there is a relationship built there and they are interacting on social media on an ongoing basis, if the content is, good enough, interactive enough, interesting enough, that will keep that individual engaged to be a referral source. So, but if you don't do that the right way, turns it off and they don't care. So I think a lot of cases, if social media is done the right way as a business, it is to develop a group of people. Like, I'm in a BNI networking group. It's the same idea. We're trying to get all these people that have some degree of interest in what you're doing, and you have to communicate them in a way that it's not annoying, but you're interacting with them and so forth, and getting them to spread the good news. And that's hard. But that truly is a different way of advertising that did not exist before. I mean, that is, again, I can't state that enough, is that we have been around where just the marketing industry kind of got turned upside down. But the thing that stayed true in all of this was good writing and good content. Design is still there, but it's this idea that, like, at the end of the day, it's like you said, it's not about me as the business. Like, when we meet, we talk about that. It's not what we think. It's not about us. It's about your audience and your consumer. So I don't care what we think or you think. If the data is telling us that, you know what, they really like these kinds of videos, or this poster did really well, or hey, we put this blog out and they don't care a heck about that.
Yeah.
It's about them.
Yep. So circling back around, I mean, I think we can safely say that moving forward, I mean, all of you have seen a lot of platforms come and go in the last 10 years, and so have we. So really, it's going to be a matter of who you're marketing to and what they care about. And maybe that's only on one platform. And you know what? That's okay. If you're reaching them, that's all that matters. So just be thinking about those things as you kind of move forward and think about where your priorities should be as it relates to some of those digital marketing platforms and social media. So one thing we like to do each time we have a podcast is come up with a question of the day where we each have an opportunity. And if we have a guest on that particular day, they also get to talk about it and answer that question too. But generally, it's kind of a funny time, casual. We get to learn a little bit more about each of us.
Okay, you go first on this theme song thing. So if you had a theme song, what would it be for you?
Oh, mercy. I was actually supposed to save that one for our next part 2 episode, but
well.
you just threw that
I
pupper
did.
out there.
I like to. Well, I'll go first if you're
Okay,
stuck.
you clearly know what
Well,
you're going to say.
So, for most, well, you know this, I got a lot into listening to scores of movies, specifically superhero movies. I am huge
Oh,
into
so this
listening
isn't
to
like a sitcom answer? You have to, like,
A
have to be
theme
some
song.
sort of, like, song from your...
It doesn't matter. It could be any
Okay,
song.
okay.
But for me, if I was to say it was a theme song, it would be one of the songs from either like Man of Steel or Spider-Man or Batman. Just one of those where there's no words and it's just kind of like a, whatever. Kind of, it's a pump you up. It's like Rocky without being Rocky. That's mine.
I don't know the answer to this one.
Well, why don't we just stay tuned for next time? So you can
Okay.
think about it.
Stay
We can
tuned.
come back.
That is how we will intro our next episode, is staying tuned to Holly's answer on if you had a theme song, what would it be?
All right.
I know you guys will be waiting on bated breath.
I am. I have no idea what the answer will be.
All right. Thanks for listening, guys.
All right. Thank you.
Bye.
For more information on Generate Marketing, please feel free to check out our website at generate, GENR 8marketing.com, and you can get connected to all of our different information resources such as YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and more. Thanks so much.